Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Trend Detection Podcast in our regular series about the truth about predictive maintenance. But so once again, joined by Nat Ford. I'm sure you've heard him or watched him on previous episodes. But today we're going down a slightly different route, and one that's probably slightly out of the box in terms of our usual subject matter. We're going to be talking about ABM, so account-based marketing. And I guess, Nat, first of all, I think people know you by now, so maybe a one-liner to introduce yourself. But why are we focusing on this topic when feasibly it doesn't have too much to do with our core subject matter we usually talk about on the podcast?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hello, everybody. For that one-line introduction, I'm Nathaniel. I am Business Development Director within Siemens. Been with Senseye for 5 years, and I like to talk about lots of things which make it easy and hard for people to buy our solutions. Why we talk about ABM? Well, just one thing as well. You see, I'm in a slightly unprofessional environment today because we've got builders in the house, and so I'm hiding in the studio. So, good day to make a departure from the norm. Yeah. Account-based marketing. Why on earth would we discuss that with clients listening? So first of all, what is it? So account-based marketing is exactly what it says on the tin. It's having a marketing strategy or approach that is specific to an account, as opposed to generalist marketing. Now, you know more than that than I do. You're marketing, I'm sales. But it's people in sales who drive the demand for it. And obviously, we're not going to come on and have a cynical conversation about how we get non-clients to listen to us by doing some account-based targeted marketing. But what we can talk about is where we do collaborative account-based marketing, where you have a large organization that you're working with, lots of different divisions and people and influences and ideologies, where we have a relationship and they are a client, but the sponsors and the stakeholders and the people on the client side would like to see that expand. You don't just stand back and let that expansion happen. There will always be a joint project. You and your sponsor/sponsors will coordinate some way of getting the message out about your project so that you can influence other areas. And that in and of itself is unwittingly a form of account-based marketing. So why not be professional about it? Why not get marketing involved? And so today's discussion should really be titled something like, how and when do you involve the client in account-based marketing? Why do you do it and what are the benefits? That's probably a good starting point.
Yeah, and that was a good way to introduce it. I guess the other way to describe it as well, it's internal marketing, but internal marketing within the customer. But in our world, when we talk about an enterprise sale, an enterprise product, that sale, there's lots of sites globally and things like that. A lot of people to reach within that internal base, and that's why it's important to have that focus in the wider ABM meaning. Like the way I'd use it as an external is really to attract those different stakeholders. Because you're thinking some big, global businesses, there's lots of stakeholders you want to reach with your content or your campaigns, and it's very much external. But what we're trying to do, and you'll probably go into this in a bit more detail on that, but what we're trying to do internally is focus very much on the successes of Senseye Predictive Maintenance within our customers and how they can, and how, from a marketing perspective anyway, it's how to help facilitate the sharing of those successes and create other materials to help support the sell, the internal sell. Maybe you don't want to term it as that, but it's sort of a bit like that, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe you can word it better.
Yeah. I just jotted down some notes there so we remember things to talk about because, and it's very core. It could just be about using you as a team or a vessel or people with a KPI all the time to distribute some information and distribute things about wins, etc. But I think really the point of today is talking about how to be more pointed and coordinated and some of the things you can do. Let's talk about the why first, and then we can talk about the how.
Yeah.
So because it feels a little bit invasive, doesn't it, to expect your client to suddenly get on side with you and effectively doing something which seems a bit salesy. Surely that's our job. But really there becomes a shared interest. So if you imagine any given client, especially let's look at our standard, our average vertical, our space, right? We work with lots of people in lots of environments. You'll find us on boats, in buildings, etc. But at the core of that, you're going to look at manufacturing. in manufacturing, the big companies that we work with typically have multiple sites. Those multiple sites would have lots of things in common, but they'll have lots of things which are different as well, especially if they're grown by acquisition. So, a lot of the people we start working with will start working in a lighthouse factory. So they'll be, the team you're working with won't just be end users. There'll also be people who are tasked with understanding technology, finding new things, deploying them, showing them work, and then hopefully templating that across a business. But as we all know, that point at which you prove something works, and you prove not just the concept, but the value of it, the benefits and the value, doesn't automatically, your phone doesn't start ringing. So if the KPI is for that group of people to go and find a technology, prove it, and then distribute that knowledge and create a pool of people who want to implement it, then they're going to be surprised if they think that's going to happen organically. So it needs them to do a job of work. Now, we have a vested interest because we want to sell more, so we also have a job of work. So at that point, we're suddenly doing exactly the same thing. They, for internal purposes, want to take their successes and distribute that knowledge and encourage usage. And we, as a vendor, want to show off about the things we've achieved with them, distribute that knowledge and encourage uptake. So I think it's okay at that point, as long as you're opaque and discussive about it, to expect there to be a shared project. It's probably less cringy if it comes from the client than from someone in my camp, but it all amounts to the same thing. So, historically, some of the things that we've done. So, let's finish the why. So that pretty clearly describes the why, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A big account company, their plan is not to test software and then leave it in the box. Their plan is to test software, prove the outcome of that software, prove the benefit of the outcome and the value, and then scale it, as is ours. So there's a shared dream. Now, of course, you could be really, really bad at this, or you could be very good at it, or you could be somewhere in between. So now let's use the time to explore the how. How would you do that? What things have we done? What things do we think perhaps we could do? This would be a really good podcast if it'd been one where we'd had the ability to have live questions and more to the point ideas, because you get to learn some stuff on this as well. So maybe when we go back to that format, we could utilise that.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're going to publish this and pretend it's live, in which case everybody questions are coming in. I assume or not.
No, don't worry.
So I'm going to stop talking in a minute and point out that you are actually marketing and I'm not, so I should be asking you questions as well. But there is one last thing I wanted to point out. On a recent, with a client recently, we were asked to come in for exactly this type of purpose, to be involved in an internal webinar. Now, they're a large organisation, so they've got enough people within their business to legitimately run a live session with hundreds of people registering to listen to it. And the topic was predictive maintenance. We weren't there to sell, we were there to support on messaging. But we never got through our introductions because so many questions were coming in. And what the session actually revealed was that there were multiple teams in multiple locations looking at multiple solutions. So this thing about internal marketing or account-based marketing, it's not just about marketing. It's not putting banners out saying, come and see us at Stand X. It's really also, it's more involved than that. It's about unpicking and helping to understand, because big companies don't necessarily, we know that big companies don't know what's going on within big companies. How would they? No one's got the perfect systems. We're all growing fast and organically. So a piece of this work is not just about telling, it's about finding out and a shared journey. So it's not, in a weird way, you're not just collaborating with your client to help market and tell, you're collaborating with your client to go through what's almost a sort of traditional whole sales process, qualifying different areas of the business for your solution, understanding what objections they've got or what other things they might have done, for then coming across competitors, which of course there will be, and then finding out how to work in conjunction with them or how to complement them or not, as the case may be. That probably gets a bit more complicated. But yeah, so it's a big meaty topic and doesn't necessarily get discussed very often. taking that distribution of sales activity and shifting it forwards into a different environment where you expect to have some inclusion. Okay, so I think I've beginning to pick up the introduction. Let's start on how. I'm going to ask you a question, Niall. So we've set the scene. I've come to you. I've got a desperate need for account-based marketing within one of my accounts. What are the things that we could do to start helping them dissipate, to spread the word and the knowledge?
No, it's a good question. I'm not used to be on this side of the table, so the pressure's on to come up with something very interesting. No, I think the top point I would say, and I always say this, and marketing people don't do this enough in general, but in relation to this particular topic, it becomes even more important for obvious reasons. But I think the first thing marketing people should do is just talk to customers, because quite often there's this, oh no, it's the account manager. That they're the relationship with the customer, or the salesperson, they're the relationship with the customer. We don't, and there's certain, not you, Nat, and not others in my experience with Senseye or Siemens as a whole, but sometimes it may be previous companies. People get very protective. Don't talk to my customer. I don't know what you're going to say to my customer. But actually, for marketing, so marketing in general, it's good to know, from the stuff we do day to day. Are we doing the things that how people have changed and how they buy has changed over so many years. In 10 years, you need to talk, and the only way you'll know is by talking to them. How do they do their research? But sorry, that's going away from this particular context. But
I'm going to interrupt you because I just want to say something about you as an individual and your approach. So, and it's not going away from the topic, because any time that we ask you to get involved with, or you ask us to get involved in our accounts, that is marketing involved in accounts. So effectively, you are doing account-based marketing, and you are superb at it. It was. I remember when you joined the business, and the first thing you did was went off to speak to the clients, and I was like, hallelujah! 25 years, finally, it's happened. I have obviously met other people do it before, but you were straight in. It was like your natural strategy, rather than a thing that you had to do, so you tick the box and get it done. You base your campaigns on that. So that's superb and fantastic, and exactly how it should be. And it's important to the clients, as we're going to cover. So yes, thank you for that.
No, thank you for that. And I do. Even now, it still plays great importance, and not just that initial conversation, but having where there's opportunities to continue that learning. And from what you were saying before that about becoming more collaborative with clients on marketing, because I've heard of ABM before, and too often ABM is like a tool. It's like something you buy, or it's doing some LinkedIn ads. Which are fine strategies, but this is where it's sort of taking it to a new level, is where you're actually sitting with with a customer directly saying, what are your issues? How can we help you? What content do you, well, from my point of view, it's very content focused, as you can imagine, but it's like, how in general can we support you to convince others in the business of in this case, Senseye's scalability and the outcomes it can provide and all this kind of thing. So so it's a long-winded way that to push that point, talk to customers first and understand. And the other thing is and for that reason, you can't do a one-size-fits-all approach. So we can't just say, we'll do exactly the same for this customer and the approach, because as you know, different sites, different industries, different internal politics, I guess you might say as well. Whatever, you've got to approach it in that way and come up with a plan based on the client and the current situation of the project, I guess, as well, is the other thing. But,
Okay, well, look, let's in case we've piqued interest, now people actually want to know what we do. Let's talk through, because you could probably map some of the stuff that we've done from past to present based on how we've evolved. So I just talk about some of the stuff I remember us doing from the beginning days? And then we can talk about some evolution of that. So I suspect that everything we've said so far could really apply to any type of software project or really any kind of client-facing project where you want to be involved in multiple divisions. So let's talk specifically about Senseye Predictive Maintenance and some of the things we've done. So as a starting point, if you imagine a project happening, you're not really in control of what people do or don't say about you on a daily basis, or the water cooler or in the corridor, or as they're doing some maintenance work and discussing how they ended up there. What we can control is information about good stuff, what happens. So we strive to be good at capturing cases that happened that are of interest. So in a given account, of course, there's going to be some nervousness from people who spent money or invested time or convinced others to be involved in the project. They want some way of communicating that success. So that's a sort of starting point for what you could consider marketing. So we capture cases. So a thing happens, a case is raised, some degradations are occurring on the machine, a case is raised, an investigation happens, and they think, oh gosh, had we not been alerted to this, then we could see that the long-term ramifications of this degradation would have been this calamitous event. And therefore we can say, aren't we lucky we had Senseye in place? Because had it not raised this slightly dull case, we would have had calamity in the future that would cost us money. Now, those stories come and go. And if you think about the core of it, what's actually happened is a boring case was raised, probably a tedious investigation was conducted, and a rather boring action was enacted. And it saved a much more interesting but terrible future. So we need to be careful to capture that information and put it in a nice slide where it looks not boring, but people who need to understand this stuff can go, I'm pleased I backed that project because look, here's an email that I've just received that tells me that because we did it, amongst other things I don't know about, because we did it, we've avoided a 2-day shutdown, or we've avoided an hour of downtime, or whatever it might be. But ultimately, these are all efforts towards efficiency and better production, better profitability. So the people who have had to dig deep, justify, try and understand and sign things off, this is our first method of communicating to them, continuation. And of course, as you build a deck, which is what we do, you start to build up a really nice piece of marketing collateral that is account specific, that you wouldn't use externally, but you use within that account. And that's something that you and me have been involved in previously in our accounts, building those things. And that's successful. And I have to say, we probably fall foul of the same thing. There's nothing particularly sexy about avoiding failures. There's something really exciting about firefighting, but that's not what you want to be happening. You don't want heroes in that sense. You want heroes because they've used our product, used it well, and changed the overall frequency of negative events in their environment. And of course, gone on to do all the other good stuff, like created a much better, more precise and controlled maintenance process. But, we're looking for those early things that you can market. So that's important we capture those. And as a sort of next step from that, something else that we've done to help with internal marketing is customer-based newsletters. We spoke a lot about those because it's quite complicated trying to work out what's appropriate to put in them and what isn't. We're not part of that company, so what right do we have to write a newsletter about them? Well, probably quite a lot if we're involved in the project. So I think maybe you had some reticence from us as a team of people that was an inappropriate reticence you had to battle against. So maybe this is an apology. It feels like it. I'm sorry that we were reticent. Do you want to talk a bit about the newsletters?
Yeah, well, not specific, but it comes back to my point again, is that, the thought behind them was, from our perspective, but the problem, it was only from our perspective. We're sort of thinking, oh yeah, no, it's great. And we're providing information, and for all the reasons you've mentioned. So it should be great and our clients should be happy with that. But the problem is, were we talking to them and saying, does this suit you? Is PDFs okay in your organization? Would this resonate? Would this type of content resonate? And we weren't necessarily doing that on an individual level. So and maybe at the time it was, I guess we probably do have more resources in order to, because we're moving to this sort of newer approach, more collaborative with the client, which I think is best. But
yeah.
Maybe it's a starting point. We wanted to get some information, provide it in an easy format for the client to then share. But now I think we're taking a very positive step and is actually meeting, and it's something I wanted to come on to, but in how to get this up and running is we talk about champions a lot, but I think we talked about this yesterday as well, but it's about finding those champion people within there and engaging with them about, what can we do? And sorry, champions, it could be, not champions, multiple. And it's really, again, reiterates that point, is it's sitting down with them. But so I think they served a purpose, but I think if you really want to if you really want to make a bigger impact, and it all comes down to resources, of course, whether you've got resources to do this, but if you've got resources to do it, to sit down, listen, build a strategy out with eyeball to eyeball, I'll say, with the customer, then that's obviously going to be a much, better,
much stronger
strategy.
Exactly.
Stronger.
And you're more likely to fall into the client's themes and formats and cadences and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. And it's not that far away from, like, people in marketing, talk about personas. We do content for this IT persona, we do content for this maintenance or engineering persona. But, and then if you go down a level, it's like, this customer in food and beverage industry with this many employees, this many sites, that exactly, you could do something similar there. But that's why I thought it was really interesting with your idea. But the other thing I know it's a lot of me talking on this podcast, but what I wanted to ask as well is about the wider, because we're talking about marketing and the effectiveness of that. But like, we had a call yesterday about one of our accounts, and it had a much wider team on the Senseye Predictive Maintenance side. So maybe could you talk about that a little bit and sort of the wider role of other colleagues from other departments?
Yeah, sure. So the way that we are configured, there's three main characters who would be involved in an account. The other people, but the three main characters would be people like me, so sales, who are gently encouraging clients to buy stuff from us. And then there'll be people who we call pre-sales or solutions engineers, who bring the technical understanding to the stuff that I'm discussing, or bring some technical credibility to meetings that I would organise. And then there's delivery, who they're the kind of bedrock of the technical competence. So they're the ones who are either guiding a client or directly doing the implementation of a solution, or might be involved in delivery of that solution, or they might be involved in services related to consumption of the solution. So they might do weekly things that we're contracted to do to help to actually feed into maintenance programs. But anyway, so there's roughly speaking those three groups of people, and that's okay for a first engagement. But if you're going to seriously take a large organisation with all the complexity of large organisation and roll out to multi-sites, sort of 50 plus sites, then you need more characters. First of all, you need more, not full-time, but people who are responsible. So this is one of the joys of being part of Siemens now, because before we could have these conversations and then we look around the room and be us who need to deliver it. Or, obviously not just you and me, but there'd be, the core Senseye people. As Siemens, we can now start to look more holistically and say, okay, so this customer X that we're discussing, within each country that they appear, there will be individuals from a sales perspective, from a solutions architecture perspective, from a delivery perspective, who we need to evolve and should be evolving in those conversations. And that means that there's a renewed responsibility within Basecamp to make sure that people are taking charge of marketing to those people as well, making sure they have the information they need to discuss our specific solution within the context of that client. Wins of the past, nuanced stuff of the past, architecture, specific considerations over things that company will or won't do, security-related issues, overall legal issues, etc. So you can have a much wider team with more nuanced responsibilities. Also, I think that when you've got a large organisation that's spending significant amounts of budget on a significant solution, you should have in place a respectful steering committee with people from different levels of the organisation who can match their counterparts within the corresponding business. So as part of, if you were looking at this through the lens of you as a marketing department, you can see all of those different characters and players, or be them, some of them are going to spend 5 minutes a week on it, some much more than that. But you can see them as different voices and vessels and abilities to get the message out in collaboration with me and the sales team. But yeah, so I think that's what you're talking about, wasn't it? The larger team, wider team of people that need to be engaged of communicating internally with the client.
Yeah. So I guess it was just to illustrate that point that it's not just a marketing person responsible and a sales or an account manager person responsible, but there's other people who can influence it. And you made the point, it doesn't have to dedicate all of their time to it. It's like stakeholder engagement, isn't it? Some will dip in now and again, some will be there, right in the center of it, and some will be, so it's just different roles. Different roles within that, I guess. I was just thinking on the customer side. So if we go back sort of the customer journey when, they do I'm not going to say proof of concept, proof of value, as is our new term. But, and obviously this is before necessarily a big scaling action. But is a customer sort of aware, even at that point, even at the early stages, or is the scene set earlier on about, the point where, we're going to scale? Well, I guess you do set that. Sorry, that's obvious you do. But about, this marketing approach and working together, is that sort of understood quite early on, or is that too early to have those conversations? I guess
it's not too early, but it may not be remembered. So it completely depends on the situation. If you think about the journey you go through a client, you would hope that you have a core team of people that you work with for at least the first 2 years. But that's subject to change, right? So you might find that your introduction is a group of people who need to find organisations like us with technologies like ours. You might very quickly find yourself speaking to a different group of people once you're in delivery mode. But yes, when you're telling this, when you're doing your first introductions and telling the story of how we engage, we talk about the stages: scope, design, deploy, operate, which is used, and then refine. And that refine process can involve all manner of complexities. When you're thinking about the subsequent scale, you should be talking to them about the kind of things we'll do. A lot of it may fall on deaf ears. Depends what kind of project you're getting into. If you've got a company who've decided that they need to have a global approach to predictive maintenance, then it'll probably be very welcome. If you're speaking to someone who's got digital and future in their title, they might just be interested in a first project and not see things that far. A lot of people we meet run a lot of projects that don't go anywhere, so they might have never considered what happens when they scale. So yeah, mixed bag, but of course we should be making the effort to explain this where we can.
Yeah, okay.
These are important differentiators for us as well, because we have the experience of doing these things, and so talking about it sort of allows people to know that. How much time have we got scheduled for this session, by the way?
Well, as long as we need. I know we can go into a lot of different areas. Can I just focus something in for a second? Because
of course, we're talking generally about. We talked about the why, and now we're talking about the how a bit. But just to sort of come back to one key point, we spend a lot of time. We spend hours of our lives, days, months, considering how to talk about this stuff and how to position it. And we get lots of experience doing it because it's what we do. It's our entire reason for being. But of course, for our sponsors and users, it's not. It's a small strand. It's a product they use. It's probably as significant in their life as, say, some of the things on my phone are. I can't think of a corresponding thing that would be as important or not, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So should someone say to them, hey, you're the guy who was involved in that Senseye project, how's it going? They're not going to be able to go, well, and give some schmarmy answer that contains all the relevant information. They're probably going to go, it's really good. It's good. Good. It's not empirical or quantitative or, So it's incumbent upon us to actually create stuff that enables them to answer that question efficiently for the people who need to know the answers efficiently. So you're somebody within finance. You took charge of some of the evaluation process, but you haven't been involved since. It's 7 months ago that you finally finished the negotiations with us. And you genuinely haven't had time, but are very interested in finding out what happened. So you ask character X, how much better? They say, I'm really glad you asked, it's going really well. Let me send you a link to the portal with all the information on it, or an email. And that portal or that email would have a playbook and a video. And the playbook would describe, in short form, kind of like a magazine, the project so far, the goals, where we're at with it, all those sorts of things. And then maybe more detail for new sites, like what do you need to deploy? What kind of project team do you need? What sort of resource needs to be in place? What's the usual deployment timescales? Who are the people you need to contact? That sort of stuff. And a video, and that video could be a day in the life of a maintenance person and an asset, where you could re-explain the logic and reason for Senseye, but instead of it from the point of view we normally do, from the point of view of a thing that they all know about, a troublesome motor. So they're the sorts of things. So what you're trying to do from a marketing and sales combined perspective is create, for want of a better word, memes, stuff which is mimetic in its, is that the word? Yeah, mimetic in its nature, that communicates nice and easily and is easy for other people to then communicate, that tells the story where we're at so everybody understands the successes. That should be the sort of the goal of the how.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I think it's a really interesting topic. Like I said, there's lots we can go into, and your question before about how much time do we have? We do have a certain time limit on both of our time, of course, but I think you're certainly right. We should dive into this in a bit more detail, because I think, and especially because I know we're sort of, let's say, rolling out this approach, this more collaborative approach. We should check in again on this topic and say, how's it go? Did it go as we expected? Were there things we had to overcome? I'm sure there will be. And we could, it's like a diary entry in this, because it's really interesting. I've never heard ABM, when you mentioned this about doing this, I thought this is actually, much better approach than this ABM. Let's get some ABM software. Let's do LinkedIn ads. Let's do a newsletter or whatever. But this is something much more collaborative, which I think is fantastic. But I'll end on one more question, I guess. So, and again, we were just talking about this, about how you just don't know who you're going to get in terms of engagement. Because if you have a very engaged client, they're going to want to be more collaborative and want to scale and get all the support they can and work closely with marketing, for example, to help achieve that. But in terms of getting started, can we sort of just summarize in terms of what's the vendor's role in this and what's the customer's role in this, if they want this close collaboration to help scale the product?
Further? Well, there's lots of things we haven't drilled into. So at a surface level, it's our responsibility, and the onus on the client is to agree to be involved if they see. So I guess the first responsibility for someone like me to convince them that this is beneficial, to help, for them to agree that it's beneficial to them as a business and that we become a joint force. And then the responsibility is on us is to, this again, it's not their core competency, so it's us to guide that process. However, different organisations will have different levels of some companies we work with will have an L&D team who'll be waiting in the wings to take everything we do and turn it into training modules. And they will have whole sections of their competency which are based on not cultural change, but basically adoption. Somewhere, depends what their company terminology is, but they will be tasked as being the people who need to make sure that these deployments are successful. Other companies never heard of that stuff. So our responsibility, I guess, is to measure their readiness and then get involved in the way that we should appropriately at that stage with them. And of course, Niall, as you know, there'll be companies who don't want to do any of this with us. And there'll be others who get deeply involved. So, yeah. Is that woolly enough an answer?
And that sort of circles back. Woolly, very, very woolly. I'm feeling sheepish. No, sorry, that's terrible. Shouldn't be doing jokes on this podcast. Again, I've said it for the 1,000th time. It's different approach for different customers, and like I said, even some customers might not want to engage or don't have the time and resources. Like I say, it's one strand of their day, as you put it, which I think is not a good way to put it. But for those who do and see, because like we said, it's not just a technology; it's more sort of the potential is to be more transformative than that. So the ones who get it and get it quite early on, I guess, are more likely to follow this approach and see that future success as a partnership. Again, to emphasise that partnership and collaboration, not just vendor hands over to customer. Not in terms of just this, but obviously the approach for delivering customer success. It's all very sort of tied together, very close relationships. But I think
it's exactly, and I think as my last night on it, I think if you think about over the years that we've worked together with this company, you can think of some of the most of the standout organisations that we work with, you'll know the names of the one or two people who we engage with a lot, because we have those individuals who are important, who I introduce you to. And in a way, we owe it to them to be slick at this, because this is what enables them to communicate well internally. So in fact, this is not an option; it's a must, and it's something that we owe our clients and our stakeholders on our client side. So let's crack on and do it well.
Exactly, and what a lovely positive note to end on as well. So, and yeah, like I said, I think completely right. I think this is the start. Well, it's sort of a restart for us in our approach for customer relationships, let's say. So we'll definitely document this along the way, bring others in who are involved. Like I said, there's other stakeholders within the Senseye Predictive Maintenance team who can definitely offer their insights from their perspective as well on this. But for today, thank you, Nat. Thank you for interviewing me as well. So maybe I have a future in being an interviewee.
I didn't push you hard enough. I'll try again next time.
No, I need to be more Paxman or someone next time. But grill me a bit. But no, it's been a really interesting conversation. I'm looking forward to where it goes. But for now, thank you everyone for listening, and see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Cheers, well. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.